Welcome to Scaling New Heights, a program by engineers for engineers. We'll take you behind the scenes and provide a small glimpse of what it takes to create the software and services that make our modern world possible. As you'll learn, the problems aren't just technical, they're also human. Each executive on our program is a member of the ENG community. ENG stands for Engage, Network, Grow, and it's a peer network of more than 200 top technical executives at leading SaaS companies. They're each on a personal and professional journey to scale to new heights. Joining us today is Adam Wolff. Adam is the VP of Engineering at Robinhood, responsible for the infrastructure team. Welcome, Adam.
So great to be here. Thanks, Christine.
So Robinhood has experienced a lot of explosive growth and also some of the growing pains that go with that. Can you give us a sense of the impact of this growth on your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. Well, as you say, since the beginning of the year, Robinhood has just seen explosive growth in the engagement of our existing users, in new user signups, really in every possible dimension. Also in the size of our team. You know, we're hiring really quickly and adding engineers really quickly. And I think when I think about how growth works, that's actually the thing that I think is really hardest to comprehend, is that you know, the whole universe is expanding. And actually, you know, that's true of like the physical universe. And for me, that's really hard to picture, you know, because like it feels like you're just standing on the planet and everything is the same. And the idea that everything is scaling together is really difficult to conceive of. So, you know, for instance, when you make a plan about where you expect to be in 6 months, it's really hard to account for the idea that you may have, you know, 5 times as many users, or a service that is currently handling X number of requests, maybe handling 10 or 100 times that. And, you know, one example of this is that throughout a lot of 2020, you know, we are setting records for peak QPS in the morning when the market opens and when our users all come to our app. And, you know, one thing we've realized is that we want to get out of that. We want to get to the point where we are setting records using our own load testing tools so that we know what will go wrong, ideally not at peak times when everyone is trying to use our app. So if you've ever tried to build these kinds of tools and these kinds of frameworks, you know that is in itself a non-trivial engineering task. So that's another way that we're scaling, which is building teams that didn't really exist before to try to help us achieve this scale. You know, classic example is that as your team grows and you're onboarding 20 engineers instead of 2 every week, you know, you need more staff to just make that work, or more people to just image the laptop. So everything has to grow when a company grows this quickly, and it's hard to get everything and think of everything that you'll need to grow.
Sure. Well, you've been there 2 years. During that time, you've definitely seen a lot, and you've been on the leading edge of deploying a very modern stack. Is there any lessons you'd share with others on that same journey?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of painful lessons that I've learned, and a lot I still don't know, honestly. But you know, there's kind of one story I want to tell that I think is emblematic of what this has felt like for me. So when I joined Robinhood, there was already this project underway to get some of our services to use Kubernetes. And you know, I came from Facebook, where we had really sophisticated and high quality frameworks for deploying different kinds of jobs in a very abstract way. You just sort of, because ideally you just want to say like, hey, I don't really care how this is going to run. I just wanted to do, you know, these things maybe at this time or whatever with this expected load. So I read all the marketing materials for Kubernetes, and I like played with the demo. I was like, this looks great. This seems like exactly what we need. So I'm 100% on board with this goal of getting onto Kubernetes. And that was 2 years ago. And where we are right now is we're still working on our migration to Kubernetes. We've made a lot of progress, but it's been much more difficult than we expected. And there's a lot of reasons for this. And I think our team is not alone in finding that this path is more treacherous than it appears. But I think, you know, in retrospect, I think it's pretty easy to say that management and leadership, myself, you know, being the primary instigator of this, made a mistake in saying that we wanted Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is not what I want. I actually have no real opinion about the technology that we use. What I want are faster releases. I want, ultimately what I really want is immutable infrastructure. I want to get to the point where it's easier and faster to deploy a new build with the fix than it is to go back and try to change anything. And I didn't say that. I said I wanted Kubernetes. And what I found, you know, for a company like Robinhood, even when, you know, we're a few hundred engineers now, for a company like Robinhood to deploy a technology like Kubernetes, it's not just one team. You have an infrastructure, a platform team that's looking to deploy this. You have a security team that needs to sort of agree on how we're going to do this and what the potential gotchas are. And then you have product teams that need to decide that it's worth it to adopt this technology. And if you frame the goal in terms of the technology, you leave room for interpretation by all of these teams. And each one of these teams will bring their own goals, desires, fantasies to this project. So a great example here is that, you know, the platform team has gotten really sick of managing all of these bespoke deployments that have weird little quirks. You know, when you release this one, you have to ring a bell and turn around 3 times, you know, or this one can only be released on a Tuesday, that kind of thing. And, you know, these things start off for good reasons, and then they get weird over time and cargo culted and turn out to be not good. So the platform team will often, you know, if you're not careful, and this is true of every infrastructure team, the infrastructure team will serve itself rather than serve the business or the product teams. And that was the direction of the Kubernetes project for a little while, where it became a little more about telling product teams what they couldn't do or what they would have to do to fit into this architecture. And it's required several adjustments to get this to really work for the customers of this solution, who are ultimately product teams who want to deploy their software as frequently as they can. So, you know, go ahead, Christine. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So I'm just thinking now, you're in this super hyper growth environment. How do you take, it's a very specific learning from that experience, but it seems like it would have pretty broad implications at a leadership level. Like, how does this all manifest for your team now in hyper growth?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, this is this thing of, you know, it's actually really hard to predict what the team is even going to be able to do in hyper growth, because, you know, you have this growing team, growing customer base, growing product suite with growing features and sophistication. I think a good example and a comparison point is a new journey that we're undergoing. I'm happy to report that we've actually made a ton of progress with Kubernetes, and it really boiled down to defining a new abstraction that is completely bespoke for Robinhood. It's this thing we call the archetype framework, and you can look it up. We blogged about it, so you can see a little bit of what we're working on, and sharing that around a little bit. I've heard from a bunch of people that the folks who've been on this journey have had to undergo something similar. And, you know, I think from that, we took away a healthy skepticism for any prepackaged solution, and really an understanding that anything that's going to work for Robinhood is going to need to be customized. But, you know, at a leadership level, I think this is really a great example of how I can always improve in terms of how I frame a goal. You know, and I like technical details. I still write code when I can, and I like understanding, or at least being familiar with some of the things that are going on under the hood. But ideally, that wouldn't really inform the direction that I set as a leader. And I think a better framed goal is something that we're talking about right now as we head into the second half of 2020, which is an architecture that we are referring to as a cell-based architecture. And I think this is an idea that's really just starting to gain traction. But the idea is that, you know, you have these different services. Like in Robinhood, let's say we have a crypto service and an equities trading service and options trading service. And when we think of scaling these services, the classic way is to scale these things independently. So the options trading service, would be sharded against multiple databases, let's say, and the crypto service would separately be sharded against multiple databases. Now that's necessary. You can't obviously put everything in one giant relational database, as much as that would be amazing and so much easier if you could. But what we realize about Robinhood's product is that unlike a lot of other Silicon Valley firms that are building, marketplaces or social networks, a Robinhood financial account is by design something that's only accessed by one or maybe a couple of users, if we have joint accounts or something like that. And what that means is that it's actually not only possible, but desirable to put one account in one shard. And, say I have a Robinhood account that can go in shard A, and you have a Robinhood account that can go in shard B. And maybe these things never, ever have to talk to each other. Or when they do, it can be just as if, we're talking to like a whole nother bank or something like that. And what this means is that now we have these crypto options and equity services. They're each separated into these account-based shards. And maybe, there's a controller that sort of knows what the overall sharding is for accounts, but the individual services are really relatively unaware of this. And the really exciting thing about this is that it limits the number of inter-service connections and the number of hosts, basically, that need to talk to each other. And what we found, again, experiencing this hypergrowth, is that it's those second order effects that really get you. Like you can almost always find a way to scale something by adding more machines or tuning a database query or something like that. But what you don't think of is that, when you add those machines, they'll all go access your service location system, or they all need to talk to Kafka, or and it's these connections that actually ultimately cause problems. So we really think that cell-based architecture can increase our fault isolation and reduce some of these like scaling pain points. Now, not all of them. At some point we need to be able to know every customer who traded a given stock today, but we can kind of assemble those queries potentially in a different way. And what I think is really different about this from the goal of like pursuing a cell-based architecture versus the goal of being on Kubernetes is that we can set some measurable milestones that are along the way. Like if we say we need to be on Kubernetes, then we're either on it or we're not. And it's hard to know if we're winning when we do that, right? Maybe we're on Kubernetes, but everything's worse. With cell-based architecture, we can set some interim milestones that say, we measured that we have fewer connections among hosts, or we can identify that we even have production issues that don't affect as many machines as they would have if we weren't in this kind of architecture. And we've actually already seen this, and the nice thing is this isn't all or nothing either. We can sort of slowly move into this architecture. The last thing I'll say about this is that whether this direction is the right one or not is almost less important than the idea that it creates a direction for our infrastructure and for our team. So it's possible that we'll go somewhat down this road and decide that this isn't really going to help us that much. But for now, this structures every conversation between every infrastructure team, because everything from the load balancers to the databases can agree that this is what we're trying to do, and it aligns things in a very natural way. So we've already seen some benefits of that as we go into planning.
So, I absolutely resonate with the idea that scaling anything is really hard. Scaling technology is hard. Scaling companies and teams is hard. So I love all the lessons. If you just stepped back and wrapped it all up into a little bow from a leadership perspective, not so away from the technology for a moment, but is there one like I would do differently, or I have a piece of advice relative to how you lead now?
Absolutely. And this is a lesson I learned it again and again and again. And I don't know how I can kind of never screw it up again, but I'm determined to try. I think it's that we need to set goals that truly advance the cause of the business, or at least of like the engineering that advances the business, and not of the engineering itself. And as someone who's relatively infrastructure minded and always has been, I often get caught up in the technical details of or the coolness of a new solution. And I think it's really important for leadership to zoom out and ask, what are we trying to do? And maybe even more importantly, like, how will we know if we're doing it? And it's when we set goals in these terms. And the interesting thing is that like those kinds of goals are just as detailed and as measurable as something like go implement this specific technology, but they have a very different flavor and tenor, and they leave a different kind of room for the engineering team to go pursue them. Yeah. So
more ways to solve the problem. So that's
I think it's all about clearly defining the problem, I think, and it's so tempting to skip that step because, it's hard to imagine a solution. It's hard to define a problem without talking about the solution. But even when you do that, you have to go back and say, okay, now that we've had that discussion, let's really talk about the problem that we're trying to solve.
All right. So awesome discussion. Very quick way to wrap this up. First, I want to do a lightning round with you. So what TV shows are you binge watching right now?
Right now, let's see. My wife and I are watching Veep. We never watched that before, and it's really cute, really funny. Enjoying that a lot.
Dogs or cats?
I like both. We have a dog and a cat, but push comes to shove, I'll say dogs.
If you had to pick a different profession outside of tech, what would you be doing?
Yoga instructor.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I've been really into yoga, especially pandemic times. It's a good activity.
Cook or delivery?
Oh, cook every time. I love to cook.
And what, do you have a favorite thing that you cook? Do you have a specialty?
I cook everything. I do most of the cooking at our house. So yeah, been cooking a lot of Asian flavored food lately, but love the barbecue and the grill. Yeah.
And what are you currently reading, if anything?
Currently reading Master and Margarita, although it's going quite slowly, I have to admit.
Awesome. All right. So very last question. Adam, what is the biggest or scariest thing you have ever personally scaled?
This is a hard one that I have personally scaled. I'm going to have to say it's a work thing. And it was part of a team effort, but Robinhood has been the hardest thing to scale. I really thought that I came in, I thought a hot company like Robinhood, it would be easy to try to double the size of the engineering team or, increase the number of users. And that turns out to just be, it poses new challenges every day. So it's extremely challenging and extremely rewarding.
So Adam, thank you so much for joining us on Scaling New Heights. That was a fabulous discussion.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
If you want to hear more stories or learn about Eng and how to become a member of the community, visit scalyr.com. That's SCALYR.com. Thank you.